I had always believed that my life was perfect, or at least it used to feel that way. My husband, Marcus, and I had been married for 10 years. Our son, Ethan, was the light of our lives, and though there were moments of tension between Marcus and me, I thought it was just the usual ebb and flow of any long-term relationship. We had a solid home, routine, and family. What more could I ask for? But as the years went by, I started noticing subtle changes in Marcus. The late nights at work became more frequent, followed by unexplained absences. At first, I justified it. Maybe it was stress at the office, or perhaps he just needed space. But over time, I couldn't ignore the growing emptiness that seemed to take over our home. The silence at dinner, the distant glances, the feeling that something was not quite right, but neither of us was willing to address it. I would catch him staring at his phone late into the night, but when I'd ask what he was doing, he'd quickly dismiss it, claiming it was work emails or messages from colleagues. It didn't feel right. I'd walk around the house, trying to avoid confrontation, but inside I was dying to know what was going on. Was he having an affair? Did he no longer care about us? Or was I just overreacting? The loneliness began to suffocate me. I would sit alone at night, waiting for him to come home, counting the minutes. When he did finally return, it was as though I wasn't even there. He'd walk in, tired and distant, barely acknowledging me. I wanted to reach out, to pull him back into the fold of our marriage, but every attempt felt like a slap in the face. My heart began to break, little by little, as I tried to keep everything together, as if pretending things were normal would somehow make them so. Then one night, I couldn't stand it anymore. I decided to stay up late and confront him. But when he walked in, I could sense he was distracted. His eyes never met mine, and his usual, "I'm home," was absent, replaced by a hurried tone as he walked straight to the kitchen. I stood there, watching him move, feeling more like a stranger in my own house than a wife. When he finally looked up, there was a flicker of guilt in his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. I wanted to ask him what was going on, but I stopped myself. I didn't want to seem paranoid. Maybe he really was just tired, or maybe it was just a phase. I tried to convince myself that everything was fine, that I was just imagining things. After all, this was Marcus, my husband, the man I had built my life with. Surely, he wouldn't betray me, would he? But deep down, I knew something was off. It was in the way he didn't touch me anymore, the way he didn't look at me with affection. Our relationship felt like a shell of what it once was, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I tried to bury the doubt, but it crept into my thoughts, gnawing at me. The thought of him being with someone else was too much to bear, but I couldn't help but wonder if that was the truth. The silence between us was louder than any argument we could have had. I wasn't sure if I wanted to confront him or keep pretending that everything was okay. But no matter what I decided, I knew I could no longer ignore the emptiness that had taken over our marriage. Something was wrong, and I needed to face it, even if it meant breaking my own heart. The next few days felt like an endless cycle of pretending. I couldn't escape the growing suspicion that Marcus was hiding something. Each time he looked at his phone or excused himself for another late-night meeting, my stomach twisted tighter. I began to retrace my steps, looking for clues, trying to piece together the puzzle of his strange behavior. One night, I found myself in his office, unable to shake the feeling that I needed to know the truth. I opened his laptop. His passwords had never been an issue. He was never the type to hide things. But this time, I hesitated. Was I really ready to face whatever I might find? I almost convinced myself to close the laptop and walk away, but the pull was too strong. Slowly, I typed in the password and waited as the screen lit up. As I scanned through the open documents and files, something caught my eye. An email thread, one I hadn't seen before. My heart raced as I clicked it open. It was from a woman I didn't recognize. The tone was intimate, filled with language that no work email would ever include. My stomach sank as I scrolled through the messages, each one confirming what I had feared. My husband had been having an affair for the past few months. The exchanges were passionate, personal, and filled with promises of secrecy. He had been lying to me day after day, making me feel crazy for questioning him. But the evidence was undeniable. The woman spoke of meetings, of their connection, of the places they'd gone together. I sat there, frozen, as my world crumbled around me. The betrayal was sharper than I had imagined, sharper than any confrontation could ever be. It wasn't just that he had cheated, it was the depth of his deception. The lies he had told, the way he made me doubt my own instincts, the trust he had shattered without a second thought. I could hardly breathe, my chest tight, and my mind racing. This wasn't just a momentary lapse or a mistake. It was calculated, cold. I closed the laptop, my hand shaking. My head spun as I tried to process what I had just discovered. How long had this been going on? How long had he been sneaking around behind my back, pretending everything was fine? I wanted to scream, to confront him right then and there, but something inside me told me to wait. What good would it do? It wouldn't change anything. The truth was clear. He had chosen her over me. I wasn't just another mistake he could sweep under the rug. This was real. Instead of confronting him immediately, I did what I always did when I was overwhelmed. Nothing. I kept my composure. I didn't cry, didn't shout. I went through the motions, making dinner for Ethan, helping him with his homework, pretending everything was normal. I couldn't bring myself to face Marcus just yet. I wasn't ready to let him see the hurt that was already consuming me. But the truth gnawed at me every moment of the day. The thought of him lying to my face, pretending that everything was fine when he was sleeping with someone else, tore at me. The memories of our life together, the things we'd shared, now felt tainted, corrupted by the realization that none of it had been real. I had been living in a lie, and it was as if the rug had been pulled out from under me. It was impossible to ignore the pain, and yet I couldn't seem to make a decision. Should I confront him? Should I leave him? Or should I try to salvage whatever was left of our marriage? The anger and hurt mixed with a strange sense of relief, knowing that my instincts had been right. I wasn't crazy, as he had always made me feel. But I didn't know what to do with this knowledge. What was the point of knowing the truth if it meant losing everything I thought I had? My heart screamed for clarity, but all I could do was sit in silence, waiting for the next moment to make the hardest choice of my life. The days that followed felt like an emotional battlefield. I couldn't stop replaying the email exchanges in my mind, each word from her echoing in my thoughts. The sense of betrayal was suffocating. I had tried to maintain a facade of normalcy for Ethan, but inside, I was unraveling. Every glance at Marcus felt like a lie. Every word he spoke sounded hollow. I couldn't pretend anymore. It wasn't about suspicion now. It was about knowing the truth. The painful truth that Marcus had been living a double life while I stood beside him, unaware, trusting him completely. That night, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I had to confront him, even if it shattered everything. The weight of the secret was too much to carry alone. As he walked through the door, the tension between us was almost palpable. I had rehearsed what I would say 1,000 times in my mind, but now that the moment had arrived, I couldn't find the right words. My voice trembled as I asked him to sit down. He looked at me with those same tired eyes, oblivious to the storm that had been brewing in my heart. "You need to tell me the truth," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to remain composed. "About everything." He froze, his eyes darting toward the door, as if considering walking out. But something in my tone must have made him realize that I already knew. He looked away, his lips pressed tight, as though the truth was lodged in his throat, too painful to say. I didn't need him to say it, though. I had already seen it, the emails, the lies, the secrecy. My heart ached as I waited for him to speak, but he didn't. "I know," I said softly. "I know about her. I know what you've been doing." His face shifted, guilt flashing across his features, but it was quickly masked by defensiveness. He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. "It's not what you think," he mumbled, his words empty and rehearsed. "It's complicated." Complicated? My mind raced. How could it be complicated? You had made a choice. You had chosen her over me, over us. "Don't," I said, cutting him off. "Don't lie to me. I've seen everything. The messages, the emails. I know you've been seeing her behind my back. You've been lying to me for months." There was a long pause, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't speak. The silence between us felt suffocating, and I could feel the walls of the life we had built together crashing down. I wanted him to apologize, to take responsibility for what he had done, but all I got was silence. He wasn't ready to admit his fault. Not fully, not yet. "I didn't want to hurt you," he finally muttered, his voice low. "It just happened." Just happened? My anger flared up again, sharper than ever. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't something that just happened. He made choices every single day, choosing her, choosing secrecy, while I was left in the dark. He was trying to justify what he had done, and it made my blood boil. "You didn't want to hurt me?" I spat, unable to keep the bitterness from seeping into my words. "You think lying to me, betraying me, is better than telling me the truth? Do you really believe that? You've destroyed everything, Marcus. Everything." I could feel the weight of the years of resentment and pain bubbling up to the surface, all the little betrayals that had built up over time. The silent nights when he would come home late and avoid looking at me. The moments when I felt alone in my own marriage, but I kept pushing it aside, convinced it was just a phase. Now I could see the truth in full. He wasn't just emotionally distant. He was emotionally gone. He looked at me, a mixture of guilt and frustration on his face. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I've felt empty too, for a long time." Empty. The word hit me like a slap. He was admitting it now, admitting that the emotional void I had felt was mutual, but it was too little, too late. His empty excuses couldn't undo the damage. "You're right," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "You've been empty, and so have I. But that doesn't make what you did okay. You made a choice, Marcus. And now we're here." For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped. The house felt cold and foreign, as though the space that used to hold our family was now just a shell of what it had been. The pain, the betrayal, the sadness, it was all too much. I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out, but instead, I just stood there, staring at the man who had once been everything to me, now a stranger. "I don't know what to do anymore," I whispered, the fight draining out of me. "I don't know what to do with you, with us. This isn't something I can just forget." He didn't answer. What could he say? There was no magic word to undo the damage he had done. I wasn't sure what the next step was either, but one thing was clear. I couldn't keep living in this lie. The silence between us was deafening, and in that silence, I realized I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to wait for him to fix it. I was going to take control, whether that meant leaving him or finding the strength to move on alone. The days that followed were filled with a strange mixture of clarity and confusion. I had spent years building a life with Marcus, but now it felt like everything had been built on a foundation of lies. The confrontation had left me emotionally drained, but it also made something clear. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of betrayal. There was no going back. The man I had loved, the man I thought I knew, was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I spent the next few days in a haze, caught between the pull of the life I had known and the reality of what had happened. It wasn't just about Marcus's affair, it was about everything that had led us to this point. The emotional distance, the silent resentment, the years of pretending. I had spent so much time trying to hold everything together, but now I realized that I was the one falling apart. As much as I hated the idea of it, I couldn't deny that part of me felt a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't bound by the expectations of being a wife or a mother. I could be just me, no roles to play, no lies to uphold. I didn't have to wait for Marcus to make things right. I could make things right for myself. The first decision I made was to spend more time with Ethan. He had no idea what was happening, but I knew I needed to be the mother he deserved. I watched him play in the yard, his laughter filling the air, and I realized that he was the one thing in my life that had always been real. His love was unconditional, and in that moment, I understood that he was my anchor, my reason to keep going. I couldn't let this situation consume me completely. As I watched Ethan, I began to piece together a plan for my own future. I wasn't ready to make any drastic decisions yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let my entire life be defined by Marcus's betrayal. The thought of starting over scared me, but it also felt like a chance for renewal. I had spent so many years living in someone else's shadow, questioning myself and my worth. Now, I was finally ready to reclaim my own identity. I took long walks alone, letting my thoughts settle. The weight of the affair still hung over me, but each step away from the house felt like I was stepping further away from the pain. I started to think about what I wanted, not what Marcus or anyone else expected from me. It wasn't about revenge or anger.